Hi, everyone, and welcome to Gigging Out, a podcast about the people and businesses leading the gig economy. I'm Dana Gagnon, CMO at Every, and I'm excited to welcome Maxine Cunningham, founder and CEO of Pick My Brain. Pick My Brain is a knowledge-sharing marketplace with a fascinating origin story that includes the brilliant way Maxine quickly tested an MVP of her original idea. We covered a lot of ground in our discussion. Maxine shares why she sees being mission-driven as a competitive advantage, how she's building a community, and advice on fundraising and being a female entrepreneur. I love Maxine's story so much, and I know you will too. Maxine, I'm so thrilled to have you today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So let's kick it off. You call Pick My Brain a knowledge marketplace. Can you tell the audience what it's all about?
Yeah, for sure. So Pick My Brain, you can imagine a marketplace where you can go and pick anyone's brain one-on-one and have a conversation with them. Similarly, you could list your brain and let the world know that you are open and available to sharing your knowledge with them, both for free and paid. So we like to describe Pick My Brain as the knowledge commerce economy. We think knowledge commerce is the next e-commerce, and it's really where you can go buy, sell, and gift knowledge.
Oh, I love it. So prior to starting Pick My Brain, you were, I believe, an investment banker, then an economist, and now you're an entrepreneur. Can you talk about that career journey and what led you ultimately to Pick My Brain?
So yeah, I did start investment banking, really loved the idea of people with ideas didn't have money and people that didn't have ideas in this marketplace brought those two individuals together to exchange and create value. And I just loved that concept. And then I shifted to economics because I found finance very one-dimensional. I found they weren't asking the right questions, the questions that I was really interested in. It was more very quant heavy and not as much, what is the founder's dream? What is the founder's mission? Is this in alignment with the sustainable development goals? Those kinds of questions. So shifted to economics. Economics is all about why we do what we do, how to influence behavior through price, and how to allocate scarce resources equitably. And so studying those things gave me this really unique perspective that was constantly monetizing things, typically the unquantifiable. How do you monetize and put a value on something? Or how through price can I get millions of consumers to change their direction? And so I used that knowledge to go work at a think tank for 6 years and advocate for the environment, actually. And a lot of my work involved monetizing planetary benefits or planetary externalities. So how much is a ton of carbon should it be worth in order to stay in alignment with the planetary boundaries? How much is a watershed worth in order to save it and prevent it from being destroyed? Those kinds of things. Absolutely love that job, but just got a little bit disenchanted with the idea that you could work so hard on a policy, but then have a government come through that is in a different government and that policy be dismantled irregardless of how economically sound it was. And I think in my career, just at some very pivotal points, I saw how much work went into a policy and then how easy it was to dismantle it. And I thought, this is just not how I want to have my impact. I don't want to have this external force being able to just dismantle something that has a lot of weight. And it was right around that time. I used to be a huge couch surfer. I would stay on a whole bunch of people's couches and have them stay on mine. And I just loved this side economy that existed. And of course, as an economist, I was always someone should monetize this. This could be a really good gig. And of course, Airbnb came along and they monetized it really effectively by building a peer-to-peer marketplace. And I was one of probably the first 1,000 users of Airbnb when they first came out. And as soon as I saw the concept, I fell completely in love. And I was like, this platform is going to completely change the world. And this platform is probably going to unlock more environmental benefit than any policy I've ever worked on by monetizing a shared asset that wasn't typically available for purchase. And when I thought about those two things, and then I remember looking up okay, who started this thing? And it was 3 founders that were my age. And I was like, no way. So they just made this up. They just built a marketplace and monetized an asset and created overnight, this incredible unlocking of value, this is what I want to be in. And I just had this moment of being like, I need to be in this space. I need to be in tech. I need to be in marketplaces. I need to go from an economist over here. And so I quit my job and told my CEO why I needed to leave. And I gave myself 1 year. I called it a year on. And I said, well, I went to university for 7 years to become an economist. Why don't I give myself 1 year to make up my own university to make this transition from economics to tech? And that's what I did. I gave myself $30,000 for the year, what I had spent on my master's, and 1 year to kind of discover as much as I could about peer-to-peer marketplaces, building tech, like just this whole world. And I made up my own curriculum. I matched it to a university and did all these incredible things over the course of the year. And it was on that year that I discovered so many things. Number one, the power of designing your own education, and getting creative about that. Number two, the power of unlocking and allowing yourself space to create and explore. And it was on that journey that a whole bunch of things happened, but these thoughts kept coming back to me. First of all, I was asking a bunch of people questions. I was trying to pick a bunch of people's brains as to like, what do you work on? Why does it matter? And I found that difficult. And I remember at the same time, my mom was retiring and she didn't know how to share her knowledge. And I thought, what? What do you mean you don't know how to pass back down what you had learned for 20 plus years? And I remember thinking, I'm like, oh yeah, that is actually pretty challenging. You got to build a website and you got to like package and price and let the world know that you're open, and you got to have like a calendar integration, and you got to market yourself. That is a huge challenge. And like, as if my mom, who's not digitally savvy, could go through with that. And I remember Googling like how many people were retired that like every day in the States, and it was like some astronomical rate. And I was like, oh my goodness, I wonder if all these people don't know how to share their knowledge. And then I just had this thought. I was like, what is a conversation worth? Like, can you monetize? Like, could my mom sell her time as a retiree? Could I buy a conversation? Like, what is the value of this thing? And when I like reflected on that as an economist, investment banker, watching Airbnb monetize a shared asset, I just thought, I remember I couldn't sleep that night and was like, wow, this is like a very big concept. This is a very interesting idea. And I just had thought back to my life, how many conversations changed my perspective, changed my path, enlightened me, gave me energy, gave me new ideas. And I was like, okay, they definitely have value, but how am I going to monetize this? And so that was when I like completely shifted to entrepreneur and dedicated to figuring out, how do I value a conversation? And that's where it started. That was a very long answer, but
No, but that's such a great story. I love so many pieces of that. So you decide you want to figure out how to monetize knowledge transfer, essentially. Where do you begin at that point? So you've kind of done all this education work. What were the early days of Pick My Brain like? First of all, I have to know the name. How did you come up with, it's a brilliant name because it's so like right there and obvious. So I'd love to know when and how you came up with the name and what were the early iterations like?
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing I had to do, the name came later, but the first thing I had to do when I had this thought was like, okay, well, how do I value a conversation? How do I package it? And how do I prove that people might be willing to pay for a conversation to see if it does have value? Because we're a society that's really comfortable with buying things we can touch. We're not so much a society that is comfortable yet. We're getting more and more, but things we can't touch: personal growth, spiritual enhancement, consciousness, coaching. We're still learning how to advance ourselves without having to physically buy something. So full circle, I went back to Airbnb. They had just launched experiences, which gave me a marketplace to launch on. Now, experiences were typically like a tourism or an experience, like something that they would take you, like it was intended to help people become personal tour guides for their area. But I just wanted to use their demand and their supply to validate whether I could sell a conversation. And so I went on Airbnb experiences and I launched an experience, and it was called Coffee and Conversation with a Vancouver startup founder. And I said, let's talk about the future of work and the future of education and any ideas you have. That was like my entire offer. And I was like, because I really like this idea, I was like, I would pay for a coffee and conversation with someone, but like, I don't know if other people would. And if I can sell a coffee and conversation, clearly everyone could, because I'm like just at the beginning of this. Like, who knows if people will want to book a startup founder for a coffee and conversation. And I charged $50. So I just started. I was like, if I got paid $50 an hour to go for coffee and conversation, I would definitely do that gig. And so I launched it and I was like, okay. And I was so surprised. 60 people from around the world booked and paid me for a coffee and conversation within like 4 months. So I was like going for coffee and conversations like multiple times a week. And I was shocked. Yeah, it was crazy. And it was it was such a revelation for me, and it wasn't the like 3,000 plus dollars that I had made from literally going to coffee and conversations with people. It was the type of people that were able to enter my life because of that formalized offer, and what those conversations turned into. That group of conversations probably unlocked a couple $1 million of value because, well, I mean, even more, because it validated Pick My Brain, which is now a company that has a valuation. But just to give you an example, the very first person that booked me ended up becoming my first employee. The second person that booked me ended up writing my first $50,000 investment check. The third person that booked me, I ended up falling in love with, which was crazy. And I had this like, chemistry happens when you intellectually connect with someone on a deep level. And then I had these, like, I could talk about each one of the bookings, but then I had these 57 other bookings that gave me and left me with a global network. I'd say 70% of the bookings were international people that were traveling, and 30% were just actually locals from my city. And sitting down with that variety of people that never would have crossed my path otherwise, maybe, but very rarely, with that much intention, and them coming to that table talking about my favorite topics, future of education, future of work, ideas, it made every single experience was 20 out of 10. There was so much value exchange because I was so high vibe, because I was like, this is exactly what I want to be doing. And that would make them high vibe. And it was like I could offer so much value because they were either new to the city or wanted to talk about that. And I was like, oh my goodness, like this is such an uplifting offer. And it created, I have this now global, every person that I had a coffee conversation with, like, ended up like, if you're ever in my country, you have a home to stay at, right? It like extended beyond this transactional relationship that we're typically accustomed to in this gig world. And I when I finished that experiment, I was like, no way. First of all, Airbnb, and I was like, Airbnb probably should just do coffee and conversation because that's way easier experience to sell. But I'm gonna go all in on this idea of building a platform that allows people to sell things like a coffee and conversation. And so I did. I built the first profile, the first prototype of Pick My Brain, which was essentially a profile that very similarly looked like LinkedIn, only it did not talk about just your resume, right? I'm like, we are more than our resumes these days. We actually wear lots of hats. Like, I am an environmentalist, I'm an economist, I'm an investment banker, I'm a CEO, I'm a volleyball player, I'm a traveler. Like, I have all these hats, and so do you. And I know a lot about a lot of things I'm passionate about. Like, so Pick My Brain goes through and asks you these questions. What are you? What do you know a lot about? What areas of expertise are you in? What do you want to learn more about? What can people ask you? So it dives into that. And then on the side, it starts to ask and package and price your knowledge in new ways. And the offers we started with were really simple, which was, are you open to being met for 30 minutes? Are you open for someone to pick your brain? Which is like, I was like, that phrase came at, which ultimately ended up naming the company, which I'll loop to. Are you open for coffee and conversations? Can people book you for these things? You can unlock these offers on your Pick My Brain profile, and let the world know that they can hire you and experience that with you. And so I workshop my own profile and sold my knowledge. And then I went too far and was like, oh my gosh, if I can sell coffee and conversation, I can sell anything. And so I just started packaging in all these crazy ways. Like for 1 month, I sold like a dream out loud call. I was like, okay, guys, I don't think people dream enough. I'm going to sell an hour-long conversation where you just dream out loud with me. And I just like hear your dream and support you in it. And then I like sunset that. And I sold workshops. I sold one-to-many offers. I sold one-to-one offers. I sold packages. And I just got really comfortable with like, what knowledge do I have to share and sell? And I took that to like $50,000 in sales. And I was like, wow, okay, like I'm learning how to sell my knowledge. And then I started to onboard other people into the platform and teach them how to sell their knowledge and see how they were successful. And then I taught 100 people how to build a Pick My Brain profile and package and price their knowledge. And then I was like, oh, I need a marketplace so that people can search like all these. So I got to aggregate all of these offers that we're creating that are absolutely remarkable and put it in a marketplace. And then those 100 people brought 1,000 people. And then before you knew it, we were in 88 countries and this thing started to become a thing. And now, yeah, and then the name was just, I used to call it, it used to be named Human Stock Exchange, which is absolutely the worst name in the whole world. Um, but I was like, oh, humans are composed of stocks. Like I was an investment banker, but then my friend helped me come up with like, because a lot of people ask, like, can I pick your brain? Can I take you for coffee? And Forbes had just launched an article that was like this, the title of the cover was like, no, you can't pick my brain. It costs too much to maintain. And I was like, okay, that's it. This is starting to become a thing. Like sitting down with someone is value, right? It's not free. There is so much that you can gain. And so that name stuck. And yeah, then we had this like community of people that were learning how to package and price their knowledge in new ways and in a marketplace where you could shop these offers that don't exist anywhere else on the web. And that's kind of where that's how it kind of evolved.
I love it. I mean, what an interesting like MVP that you did on Airbnb, and then to just test the idea and then bring yourself on a platform and then add people. I'm curious, you keep, you, especially with your economics background, pricing and packaging, like I have to imagine it's really hard for people to wrap their heads around how much am I worth? Like on one end, you probably have people who want to charge a ton. And then you have like people with imposter syndrome. That's like, no one's going to want to spend money talking to me. How do you help them figure out how to price their knowledge?
Yeah, you're absolutely 100% right. Like and that was such an insight, like how much we struggle to value our worth and our time and our energy and our effort outside of typical society. But as an economist, what you typically do when you can't value something that has a price, what is the value of a tree? Okay, I have to value a tree in order to determine the value of a land. So where do I start to do that? Well, I can think of how much its wood is worth on the market. That has a price. That's like one version of thinking about how much a tree is worth. I can think about how much carbon it can sequester over the life of it and match that to how much carbon is priced. I can take two houses that have the same bedrooms and bathrooms and real estate value, but one has trees all around it and one doesn't, and find out the difference between that real estate price because how much the trees add to that property. So there are ways to discover, like I was comfortable with previously, finding the value of things. And so I started with the same idea with Pick My Brain. I said, like, how did I price that package and price that coffee and conversation? I was like, well, what's a price that would be like definitely worth an hour to go hang out with someone that's going to take me away from my opportunity cost, right? Which is a job, And so I like started around that, but I was like, but this is a fun offer. So it doesn't need to like represent my hourly. It needs to represent something that keeps my energy at a rate that I don't become burnt out. So what we did to support professionals that were packaging their knowledge for the first time is we built templates that they could opt into that were preset. Are you willing to have someone pick your brain for 30 minutes for $50? If you are, turn on this offer. That's what we recommend. You can change it, but that's a template, and we will be able to better sell if we're like, hello world, here's 100,000 people that you can pay $50 to ask any questions for 30 minutes, right? I think you and I, like most of us could be like, yeah, that's probably worth it. I'll find some people that could make that worth it. And so we would start with these templates. So how much is it to go for a coffee? This is pre-COVID. How much how much should it cost to go sit down with someone at a coffee and conversation and make your way there and sit down and go through the things? We increased the price to $75. How much is it to get someone's brain on your project for an hour, right? So like an hour of like, I want you focused on my stuff. We started at 100. And how much is, so we just started to put packages on it and ask people to opt in. And then they could adjust from there. But that set the baseline of being like, are you willing to sell for this? And then we have to go find out if the market is willing to buy at this. And it's a constant learning. And it's funny, since then, like so many people on Pick My Brain also use the platform to gift. They use it as a platform to like, I want to gift 10 to 50 hours every year to society in the form of 30-minute sessions. So it's a really big give back tool too, which again changes the value, because their value is using the tool to allow them to track their give back and to like opt in to giving back. And that taught us, we should ask every brain to gift a minimum of 10 hours a year. Because how cool would it be, right, if we could all give back 10 and we have this giant pool of available, accessible knowledge for anyone. And then beyond that, we all agree to charge, because giving back your knowledge is important. So then we shifted, then we unlocked a free offer. And then most of our offers became gifted, but we found the conversion that led to a free. So it's a constant evolution, and we're always introducing more offers. Like we just launched another offer that's like, hire me, like buy 10 hours of my time up front. And you're familiar with this. Like if I want to invest in someone, I don't want to pay per hour anymore. It's too transactional. I want to buy someone's time and draw on it over the course of the year. So can I buy your time for 10 hours or 100 hours and give you that money up front? I'm committed and I'm going to draw on you as I need. So we're always like testing these offers that both the brains are willing to opt into and the market is willing to be like, that's a good deal. And from being in the freelance world, that's like, it's a constantly changing space. Like it's so interesting watching us all move to creating our own revenue streams out there on the market.
I noticed on your site, one of the things I thought was fascinating was just the variety of, I think you call your experts brains. Everything from nutritionists to accountants to executive coaches. I think I saw a poet. Can you talk about, how did you think about that? Did you try to limit the types of experts you brought onto the platform in the beginning, or was it always just kind of like letting the supply dictate what was there?
So from the beginning, the first vision was like, what if I could have a coffee and conversation with anybody? Like the value of that to me was the diversity angle. Nowhere, and I learned that because the people that booked me for when I hosted a coffee and conversation was what kept it so interesting. I'd have like a CEO book me, I'd have a beekeeper book me, I'd have a student from Uganda book me, I'd have someone from Brazil traveling, and I was like, holy, I'm learning so much about the world and I'm gaining such a global perspective. I don't think people even know they want this. So from the beginning, I was like, no, I want a wide variety of humans. And I know that when you're raising money and scaling a company, they want you to niche and focus. Not my strategy, because the purpose of Pick My Brain is to be able to sit down with a poet. We have a Holocaust survivor on Pick My Brain. We do have CEOs, executive coaches, nutritionists. You should be able to sample the world. And I think what my mission is, right, we all know how important diversity is, right? That's become like rhetoric. We like, yep, more interdisciplinary thought is good. Diversity is really good for ideas. It's good for partnership and collaboration and cooperation in the global scheme of things. But diversity is so hard to access. Where do you go to have a conversation with an Indigenous elder with permission? Where do you go to have a conversation with someone who's 80 years old if you don't have grandparents that's outside your world to tap into that perspective? Where do you go to have a conversation with someone completely outside of your field? Like nowhere. And the internet only reinforces you staying within your domain, right? In my internet algorithm is like startup founder, economist, raising money, like that. It knows that, right? But it doesn't introduce me to the world's people. And so, yeah, from the very beginning, I wanted it to stay super creative. So I was like, I'm going to onboard the first 100 most interesting people in my life and teach them how to sell their knowledge. So it started pretty broad. And then because it started broad, those broad people invited their networks. And that was outside of mine. And so it stayed that way. It remained diverse. And people always ask, like, what is catching on? I'm like, it depends on the brain, like how it's not the category, it's not the age. Like our Holocaust survivor is doing just as good. Our most booked brain is someone who's a non-linear thinker, who runs this octopus movement, who loves to have conversations about neurodiversity. Like I would never have guessed that. So yeah, we want Pick My Brain to be the marketplace someday, right? Millions of people that you can shop any age, any country, any industry and have a conversation, and that become normal. That become like a thing that we all do, because we know that if we meet one stranger a month and dive in, we will learn something. And that we are all just humans across the table. So yeah, it's much more mission driven than like build a niche marketplace, monetize the supply, find the demand, optimize, which makes it a longer play. But like I am so passionate about how much diversity is in the world that I'll take the longer play.
It's amazing to be that mission focused, especially in the beginning. Like I think that really shines through probably for both the brains and the people who book their services. So that's super cool. So the first 100 or so brains, you kind of vetted yourself, people in your network. How do you go about adding new brains now? Can you talk about some of the strategies you employ to find new people to add to the platform?
Definitely. Yeah. So we have two strategies. Number one, open door. Anyone can apply to become a brain. And that flow is you start a profile and you submit it for review. And building a Pick My Brain profile is a bit of a process, right? You got to really kind of dig deep into some questions about yourself to portray and build a good profile. And so our first line of defense to maintain a high quality of brains is, will they go through that process of building a profile? How good is it? If it gets approved by our team, which means it is very well filled out, then they get pushed live and our team books a one-on-one call with them so they can feel the platform, and we have a conversation with them one-on-one. We leave them their first review, and we just make sure that the intention, the mission, the vision is communicated at that very point. So yeah, we have a one-on-one onboarding for all of our brains. And I think we will always, because every community member loves that job. Like the job is like, would you like to have conversations with interesting people and just make sure that they're an interesting conversationalist and they are who they say they are. So that's the open door policy. Anybody in the world can apply. There is no rules. And the reason is because I don't know like, who am I to say what is knowledge and what isn't knowledge? Like all of us, if you believe that all of us have knowledge to pass on and share, then anybody can be a brain. And then the second strategy we are actively more pursuing is that focused, who do we want on the platform? Who do we want represented? And so we will create relationships with specific groups and go after them. So for example, we onboarded an Olympian and we're like, oh, we should onboard the world's Olympians. The world should be able to book Olympians because they're 1%. They're 1%. Indigenous elders, right? I'm from Canada. We had like a bunch of, conflict with our Indigenous counterparts. And so we're like, well, could we improve that relationship by onboarding Indigenous elders and making them available for conversation? Climate change leaders. I'm on a pursuit right now, full circle back to my original career as an environmentalist. I'm like, I want every climate change leader on here, and I want those climate change leaders to unlock mentorship for whoever wants to come into the climate space. So now I'm like thinking even more specific, not only like who I want to go after, but what I want them to unlock to enable a new connection or exchange of knowledge. So now we also like focus on like partnering with niche groups to maintain diversity, to maintain interestingness, to keep the marketplace growing. Like we imagine our PR headlines, right? When we get bigger, Pick My Brain just onboarded the Nobel laureates. You can now go hire a Nobel laureate to bring in a workshop to your company. Pick My Brain just onboarded the top 30 PhD students who are open and available to tell you what they studied. Did you know you could go buy that now? So it's like this introduction of these unique things that we'll just keep predicting will have demand.
It looks like it looks like you have some sort of community, like a monthly networking event that you do digitally. I don't know if that's for your brains or for your users, but can you speak to that? I thought that was a really cool way that you're looking at it, not just as individual knowledge sharers, but as a true community you're building. Can you talk to the importance of that?
Yeah, really good find. And like, thank you for finding that. That is like, I'm glad we get to talk about that. So, one thing we learned as we were growing this is the community's got to be strong because we're creating permission to dig in with someone pretty deep. And actually, podcasts have taken us there, right? It's really, we're getting better at that. But so, once a month, every month, we invite our brains and our users to a monthly networking event where everyone comes on a Zoom session. And on that Zoom session, we do 3 breakout rooms. And in each breakout room, we drop a question. And you Zoom into a room for 10 minutes, either one-to-one or with a small group, with a facilitated question, and you exchange. And we will drop like just so many different questions to create conversation, to create intrigue, to allow people to explore people. And so you go to one of these networking events, you're guaranteed to meet at least 3 people. And every time we host them, we have hundreds of bookings on our marketplace right after because it's just a dose. It gives you a dose of that comfortable and be like, if you met someone today that you want to follow up with, go find them on the marketplace. And that reinforces 2 things. Number one, that you can pick brains. Like people are also nervous to have conversation until they feel comfortable enough to know how to do it. So that helps them go do that. And then second, it's like, if you're going to come to this networking event, you might as well have a Pick My Brain profile so people can follow up with you and see what you're all about. So it's a really important piece in the puzzle of building the knowledge economy. I'd say the 3 things that I've learned that we need to facilitate this is number one, a profile that signals very clearly who we are, what we're all about, and that we are open and available with that clear book me button. Number 2, a searchable marketplace that makes it as easy to book a conversation with someone as it is to buy a product online. And then number 3, consistent networking, because people don't even know the types of people they can gain access to. Because if I asked you, who do you want to talk to? You'd probably name like some good people, but then I'd show you our portfolio and you'd probably be able to identify like, oh my gosh, I want to talk to that mathematician who like studies quantum physics. That'd be interesting. But you wouldn't be able to articulate that until you saw it. So those 3 ingredients create this field that we're learning. Like we have to learn how to create engagement on this new marketplace. And those 3 things are I feel like the key core pillars of doing that.
I imagine these events, these networking events, are a great demand lever for people to experience. I mean, I think you mentioned it's like a low barrier. You get to hop in and then you can book people. What are some of the other ways that users are finding you?
So definitely the networking event is one. I mean, our product is viral in that every time a brain goes live and shares their profile with their community, right? People will post on LinkedIn, hey guys, I'm on Pick My Brain, just to let you know you can book me anytime. That like spreads to their worlds. And because we have such a diverse group of brains that are sharing their profiles, that just attracts, like, again, I'm so surprised we have not spent $1 on marketing yet. And we are in 88 countries. And I'm like, what? Like, what's going to happen when we market? Like you're not optimizing at all. So that, and then people talk. So it's so interesting. Like I was in an Uber in Austin and someone had heard about Pick My Brain because someone was talking about, oh my God, I went on this platform and I had this conversation with enter like an interesting human. And they're like, what is that? And so even just by virtue of using the tool, people bring it up at dinner because it's interesting. They'll bring it up in their friend circles. They'll talk about it on stage. They'll talk about it to their colleagues. And it just starts, I mean, again, 88 countries with just me starting like with a little crew. It kind of just starts to ripple. And then we get really, we educate our brains to embed their Pick My Brain link in certain places. Hey, if you're open and available, put it in your LinkedIn bio, put it in your email signature. When anyone asks you, can I sit down and meet you? Send them your link because it will keep track. And one day you'll be able to say, I helped 1,000 people. And Pick My Brain, every time someone books you, the system asks the person to leave you a review. And so you get to collect. And it's like when I have bad days, I just go read my reviews. When you forget your value, you just go read them and be like, oh yeah, like I can help people. And so, yeah, once we like train people and get them comfortable to build this tool into their day to day, then people start to see it there as well. Right. It's got to be, I want it to become normal to see that link, just like a Calendly link is pretty normal now. Well, I'm like, I'm almost like, you guys switch your Calendly link with a Pick My Brain because it'll keep track. It changes the intention. Calendly is a great tool. Pick My Brain is like a mission. It'll be able to capture things for you. Like when I meet someone that says that they've mentored hundreds of students and I'm like, do you have a record to show that? Because to me, that's an Olympic medal. If you've done that, you should have a record, right? And if you had a record, you would inspire more people to go for the 100 mentorship hours. So yeah, and then we send prizes too, right? You hit your first 10, we send something in the mail. You hit 100, you get swag. You hit 1,000, you get to fly to Pick My Brain's CEO's house, my house, and hang. So we'll build in these challenges that like go meet strangers, and that gets out too. So we're just learning all the ways it kind of gets out there. And once we kind of have a better sense of it, and we're starting to get there, we'll start to, when we do our next raise, put some more effort behind those channels. But podcasts are also a great one.
You mentioned funding round. So you raised a seed round last year. Can you talk about the process? Any lessons you learned from going through that you think would be relevant to other entrepreneurs?
Oh my gosh, yes. Entrepreneurship and raising money is not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
It's so hard. It's because it's so uncomfortable to ask for money already, right? We already have a stigma against that. Being out, like raising money for an idea is a challenge. So yeah, full transparency. So Pick My Brain has raised about $650,000 over the last 2 years from angels, friends, and family. Yeah, just those two, no venture capital. And the way that I've done it I've just used my intuition, and I'm still learning how to raise. And right now we're in the process of raising $2.5 million, and that will be institutional money. So very different scene and different strategy. And I have different feelings about both. And I'm just starting on this one. So I'm still green. And it's like the worst climate to be raising in it, but that's okay. But yeah, my biggest advice is, learn you have to be so good at communicating the vision and the value that you are creating and get someone to see it on your plane. And someone that, has enough capital to bet on something going huge, right? People that invest in startups are betting on Pick My Brain being $100 million or $1 billion product, right? They're not taking their $50,000 and putting it in a 10% investment vehicle. They're looking for the story, the journey, and for that 50,000 to be worth $1 million someday. So you got to make sure that you know those people. You got to find that audience, your friends and family, and then you also have to remember, like, had I stayed on my trajectory of like being a corporate economist for my life, I probably would have had $50,000 to invest by now, right? I would have some disposable income. My friends are buying houses, they're buying RVs, they're traveling the world, they have disposable income. And so you typically have to start with your friends and family because they know and trust you and love you before you get the validation of investors. And so just remembering to try to quantify the value of like, okay, would you rather put that $50,000 into a real estate asset that will grow like this? Or are you liquid enough to put it in something that, like, real estate is geographically constrained. Pick My Brain can scale to any country, any company forever, endlessly. And so you just have to like communicate the value all the time, like consistently, and make them see and believe that you are the one to do it. So at the beginning, everyone's just investing in your ability to do it. And so like every time I hit a milestone, oh my God, I taught 100 people how to do this. And they're like, what? Or like, oh my gosh, our marketplace just hit like $200,000 in sales. It just hit 500,000. People start to believe you, right? And they're like, this girl is not going to stop. Like, she's going to chip away at this forever. And honestly, startups are just about how resilient you have to be. You just have to be resilient enough to stay in the game long enough. And if people believe you are that, then they're also more likely to give you money. So I don't know. I am not an expert, but that's been my strategy. But I think the institutional round is a different ball game, because now it's about the economics, and it's about your focus and where you're going to point your energy and how you're going to pour that capital on what you've learned. And so then just getting really clear on that. So someone's like, I believe that will work.
I don't get the pleasure of talking to many women founders, and it's not that I don't try, but I'm looking in the gig space, and I haven't gotten to meet that many. Can you talk about challenges specifically as a female founder, and how do you overcome them?
Okay, so I was investment banker and economist. I'm typically comfortable being in a man's world. And I actually, I really loved it because I felt like it gave me a competitive advantage. And when I first entered this, I was like, it's going to be fine. Like, I'm just going to do my game, and I am able to create value and believe in it, and it'll be fine. But I'm just starting to be like, it is harder. It is so much harder. Just numbers wise, like I think even less than 2% of funding goes to women now. And I think what I've realized, or what I'm starting to intuitize, is first of all, women are not as comfortable with numbers typically as men. We don't love to typically, I'm stereotypically talking, we're not as driven to optimize MRR and ROI and dividend yields. Like when I was in investment banking, they just love to optimize those numbers. And I was more like, what is the impact? What is the vision? What is the mission? What are we building for? Who is this helping? Right. And I find the same with women entrepreneurs. Our strategy of growth is much more long-term. We are not trying to ramp up revenue income. We are trying to create value between people and unlock impact and help people more. That is our drive. And you look at the studies too, you give money to the women in communities, and that money will be spent entirely differently than if you give money to the men. And typically when a woman has money, they spend on education and health and wellness, and men spend it on assets and things that you can buy and touch, and boats and cars and stuff. So number one, if you're raising in an environment where your competition is this is how much money I'm going to make, and this is that I'm optimizing, and you're raising from people that want to do that with their money, then it's just a different game. You're not going to, it's hard. It's like apples to oranges in your field almost. So that's been really challenging, for sure. And I think there is still this I don't know, a little bit of you can't tell it, unconscious, subconscious beliefs that women can't optimize a dollar, can't take a dollar and turn it into 10 or 100. But it is changing. And I think that I feel I'm already starting to look at funds that are run by women now, and there are more and more of those coming out. I love that there's so many niche funds coming out that are specifically designed for something unique. And so I'm just starting to only put my energy towards those, because it already feels better being in that room, the questions that they're asking me, versus being in a room when someone's asking me only finance questions. I'm like, no, you're not my type, because this is much bigger than that. So I hope in the future that the question, just as an environmentalist, I hoped that Fortune 100 companies had to have a quantitative answer of how they were aligning with the Sustainable Development Goals. I hope that startup founders have to talk about the value that they're creating among the people that they're helping more, because those projects do deserve funding, because you can't always quantify like changing someone's like the amount of people's lives, like kids, youth lives that we've changed just by offering them mentorship when they understand more of who they are and what they want to do in the world. Like, how many years is that of saving the wrong path? I don't know how to quantify that, and I'll never be able to capture that with my product, but it happens all the time. So I struggle with it. It's nice too, because Pick My Brain it was revenue positive from day one. So I'm not as disadvantaged as some other female startup founders or other startup founders in general that like are all impacted and take a while to get to that revenue. That's even like a harder game. Like Pick My Brain does generate, it's very scalable idea, and it just kind of stacks.
Final question. What's next for Pick My Brain? What can we look forward to?
We are focused. So for the past 3 years, we've been focused on building our B2C marketplace, helping people package, price, and sell their knowledge on a marketplace and browsing all these individuals. This year, we are entirely focused on B2B. And the reason is because I started onboarding groups and realized that when I onboard a group, demand and supply just comes. I don't have to create both of them. And the group that I'm actually most passionate about right now is universities. I think there's such a huge impact. So I don't know about you, but I went to school, got my master's in economics, walked out with this fancy degree, but the university actually never connected me with an economist. I actually had no idea what an economist did. I was like, okay, so I have a master's, but I like have no idea what is even possible with this degree or what one does. And now that I'm an alumni, okay, so then I graduate and I go on this journey, no thanks to the university. Now that all they ask me for is money, right? And they had the tenacity to ask me just for money after year one of graduating. I was like, you guys. So I am going back and saying, dear university, first of all, New York Times predicts 78% of you are going to die unless you adjust your business model, because education is changing so fast and people like Elon Musk are like, we don't need a degree. Okay. So unless you catch up with the time, you're at risk. Number two, what if we asked all of your alumni to gift 10 hours? We said, dear alumni, right? Will you give 10 hours of your time in 30-minute sessions to students and professors so that they can draw on your knowledge while they're in school? Our results show that like 90% of them would be like, absolutely. And we'd be like, we're going to build you a profile. They're going to collect reviews. We're going to put that in a marketplace. And then we go, university, what if you made it mandatory for a student in order to graduate to book 10 people and have 10 conversations with industry, because you know statistically and with research that if this kid or this student has more environment or emotional and social intelligence and is networking, they're automatically more likely to succeed if they didn't have those conversations, right? 100% accurate. That is 100% with validity. I can say that. So can Pick My Brain go build these knowledge marketplaces for universities so that it becomes normal? You're a student, you get 10 credits, you go to this marketplace, you get to talk to any alumni you want about your career, about money, about what you want to be, about your resume, about your anything, about mental health, about whatever it is you want. And that just becomes normal. And that interaction, that demand supply happens at such a high frequency because every year you have students and it's baked in and the alum like love it. And then you could even go much as give all your professors the opportunity to bring in alumni into the classroom with this system as well. So every time I talk about it, I'm like, that is a total no-brainer to me. Like it's unbelievable no-brainer. So we're working on getting our first few universities on board right now. They are also a very bureaucratic type organization with tons of administrative barriers. So it's not the easiest. And this is why I'm like, I need to raise, because if we get one, that's a very big onboard and I need a team to do that. And if we get one, I know I can get 800. And I think this will be the next evolution of the education system. So that is I'm like, I think that's such a good place to focus. Demand meets supply, future of education, future of work. Who doesn't love students? Who doesn't want to support students? Everyone wants to support a student. So that's where I hope Pick My Brain in 3 years, I can come back and be like, we have 100 universities on board and this is the results of that.
How cool would it be to just be able to book someone interesting for your team for like a lunch and learn? So I love that you're thinking that way. This has been super enlightening. Real quick, where can people find you if they want to learn more about Pick My Brain or from you, Maxine? How can people find you online?
Forever and always, for the rest of my life, you will be able to go to pickmybrain.world and search up Maxine. If you ever want to have a conversation, I am always open. So that's one. www.pickmybrain.world also houses 10,000 other really interesting individuals that you can have a conversation with. And I encourage you to just book one person to feel it. If you believe that it's important to expand your perspective and your global empathy and your reach, please just go to this place where we've collected a bunch of people that are willing to dive deep with you and go have a conversation. Make it a habit. And then if you want to follow our journey, I'd say if you book a brain, you will get on our newsletter. You will be invited to these global networking events. You will be showcased what kinds of things you can buy on this marketplace. So you just have to do one action and you'll be in our universe, our metaverse. So that's like my biggest recommendation. Go book a brain. And then involve yourself in the community as much as you want until we totally convince you to become a brain.
I love it. I am going to book a brain. I am for sure going to book a brain. I love it. Maxine, thank you so much. This has been an awesome conversation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for such the good questions. I loved it.
This podcast was brought to you by Every. We work with gig companies, marketplaces, delivery businesses, and more to pay their workers fast. You can learn more at every.com.